Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Taylor has poured so much thought and effort into this presentation, so I'm very excited for everyone to get to see this. I'm just going to give a little bit of background on Taylor first. She is a financial planner and an associate advisor, as well as a CFP here at Jessup Wealth Management. In addition to guiding clients through their financial journeys, she's also the author of our blog. So she writes monthly blogs dedicated to breaking down financial topics, helping both clients and the community build a stronger financial future. You can explore her blog on our website, jessupwealthmanagement.com. And then today she is going to be focusing on retirement. So this is a three-part blog series, how to have a successful retirement. So lots of good stuff in store for you today. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Taylor.
All right, thank you, Jenna. So like Jenna was saying, today we're going to be focusing on how to just prepare for a successful retirement. So these will cover my blog posts from January through March. So we'll be focusing on number one, just that pre-retirement phase, how to figure out maybe how much income you need, how to estimate your expenses in retirement. And then we'll move on to actually how to minimize your taxes in retirement, because there's different withdrawal strategies that you can utilize depending on what types of accounts you have. And then last, we will just cover some common mistakes that I see, just some small decisions that you could be making that might make a big difference just down the line. So first, we'll just talk about how to plan for your income and your expense needs. So a question that I get pretty often is how much money do you actually have to save up in order to retire comfortably? And it's not a one size fits all answer. There's not a specific number that, everyone necessarily needs to have to retire with. It really just depends on your personal financial circumstance. But just some factors that you should really consider when kind of planning and thinking about when you want to retire. Number one, it's pretty simple, your retirement age. In an ideal world, when would you want to be done working? Another thing is Social Security. Most people are eligible for Social Security. There are certain job positions that might not be covered by Social Security. So it's just important to know if you kind of fall in that boat. Some companies offer pensions while you are working there. So check to see if maybe you have a pension through work. Any outstanding debt, obviously, it's ideal to go into retirement without any debt. That doesn't always happen though. Sometimes you might go into retirement maybe with a few years left on your mortgage. And I think that's okay as long as it's not impacting your plan in a negative way. But just important to know, what's going to be outstanding when you do enter that phase. Another factor is going to be financial dependence. So are your kids, are they going to be in high school? Are they going to be going off to college? Is that going to be an extra expense that you might help them with when you are in retirement? Healthcare expenses, because Medicare does kick in at age 65. So if you do retire before 65, you will have to supplement that health insurance cost. That can be pretty expensive. So just something to keep in mind when you're also considering the age you want to retire at. And then the last factor I have on here is really just your lifestyle. So that could be your different hobbies you have, traveling, just how you really want to spend your free time in retirement, and any extra costs that might be associated with that. So I know it can be pretty overwhelming when you're trying to plan for retirement, because again, it's hard to figure out how much you actually need in your accounts to retire. So I'm going to kind of break it down step by step. so that you can kind of figure out what you'll need. So the very first thing that I think you should do is just look at your current monthly living expenses, all of your fixed, all of your variable expenses. Even if there are expenses you have now that you think might drop off in retirement, just kind of include that to at least get started. Once you have that amount, that monthly expense number in your head, think about the experiences that you really want to have in retirement. So I know a lot of people want to travel, think about the frequency. Is that going to be a monthly thing, semi-annually, the locations you would like to go to? You might be charitably inclined, so if charitable giving is important to you, you'll have to figure out maybe what amount you would want to do every year, whether that's donations or just giving your time to a local charity. And then family support. I think it's pretty common nowadays for retirees to maybe support or at least assist in supporting maybe their parents, or if they have adult children. You just see more and more of that. So if that's something you think that you will have to plan for, just keep that in the back of your mind. And then after you've thought about just those experiences you really want to have in retirement, think about how that's going to affect that monthly expense number that we calculated in step one. So when you retire, I recommend taking no more than about 5% of your total portfolio balance in retirement. That would be an annual number. So we assume that your portfolio will grow at about 7% per year, which is more on the conservative side. And then we subtract 2% for inflation, and that's why we recommend about 5%. So, if you retire with, let's say, $1 million, we would feel comfortable with you taking out about 50 grand a year, and your account should still continue to grow, and you shouldn't dig into principal. But on the previous slide, when I was talking about that monthly expense number, you know, annualize that, so multiply that by 12, and then if you divide that by 5%, then you'll have the dollar value of what you'll actually need in your portfolio to retire and maybe maintain your current standard of living. Once you have that portfolio balance number, I recommend utilizing maybe an online growth calculator. If you have a 401k, for example, through work, or maybe a 403b, there's tons of just online calculators that are free. They're all pretty similar. Um, Another option is you could always do a financial plan. We do financial plans here at our firm that also do all of these projections for you. So I would just recommend projecting out your current course of action and then comparing that to, if you want to retire a little bit earlier, how does that affect your portfolio? Or if you want to increase your contributions, how many years earlier does that get you out of, your workplace door? But again, those calculators are pretty easy to find online. So once you kind of have that projection, another common question I get is where should you actually put your money? Where should you contribute that money, while you're still working and saving for retirement? So most people do have a retirement plan through work. I would definitely start there because typically all employers will, match up to a certain percentage. So I would at least contribute up to get your full employer's match, because if you don't, it's basically just, throwing away free money. So you want to make sure you take advantage of that. The most common types of retirement plans I see through employers are going to be 401ks, 403bs. You might see a 403b through a school system or if you've worked for a hospital. And then 457s, those are typically for just government related jobs, but the annual contribution for these types of account, it's 23,500. Normally that does change a little bit every year to adjust for inflation. But if you're over age 50, you can also do an additional 7,500. So a little more than 30 grand if you're above age 50. If you do not have a retirement account through work, because that does happen, I definitely recommend opening up a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. So the contribution limits on the IRAs, it's about 7 grand a year. And then if you're above age 50, you get to put in an additional $1,000. So contribution limits are a little bit lower compared to what you could do through an employer. But again, if your employer doesn't have any retirement plans, an IRA is kind of going to be the next best option. And then lastly, we have individual accounts. They're also called taxable accounts, brokerage accounts. And I really like these accounts because if you have a goal to retire early, anytime before age 59 and a half, you can pull out from individual accounts and not have to worry about any early distribution penalties or any like extra taxation. Individual accounts are very flexible, so I think it's good if you do have an account through work and then you also have an individual account. A lot of times too, what I'll see is as you are getting close to retirement and you're in your higher earning years, sometimes people max out their retirement plan through work and then they'll ask, what do I do next? At that point, I would probably direct somebody towards contributing to an individual account, just with any of that savings that they have. So that kind of leads me into the next topic because we're going to kind of stick with those different accounts and really focus more on how they're taxed and how to structure that as income in retirement. So again, everyone's situation is going to be, individualistic, but generally speaking, in retirement, I think you should withdraw from your taxable accounts first. So again, that would be an individual account. Reason being is that it gives your tax advantaged plans more time to grow and compound, and it also creates opportunities for Roth conversions. And I'll touch on that a little bit more here in a minute. After you have started to withdraw from your taxable accounts, I think withdrawing from your tax deferred accounts next is great. So that's going to be your pre-tax account. So your 401ks, your 403bs, your traditional IRAs. The reason that I recommend taking from these accounts second is number one, you can easily estimate your tax liability because anything that comes out of these accounts is fully taxable, and you know what current tax rates and brackets are. So you can estimate your taxes owed and make sure you're not bumped up into a higher tax bracket. But I would say the biggest reason that we do recommend withdrawing from your tax deferred accounts a little earlier on is because of RMDs. So RMD stands for required minimum distribution. For those who aren't familiar with that, once you turn 73, you are required to take out a certain amount of money every single year in retirement from your pre-tax accounts. And you just have to keep doing that. So the RMD, it's based on your account balance and your age. So the bigger your account balance is, the larger that RMD is going to be. And then going back to Roth conversions, this is one reason you might do a Roth conversion. Roth conversions lower your pre-tax account balance, which in turn lowers your RMD when you turn 73. So a Roth conversion is essentially you're moving money from your pre-tax accounts to your tax-free accounts, so your Roth accounts. You're paying tax on whatever amount you move, and you try to do that every year, ideally until the pre-tax account is completely depleted. But that definitely helps lower those RMDs. And the last account I recommend withdrawing from is those tax-free accounts, so your Roth accounts. We recommend withdrawing from these last because it just gives the account a lot more time to grow. Also, kind of having that Roth account on the back burner just gives you options if needed to manipulate your tax bracket when you're a little earlier on in retirement. So I wanted to show just a couple visuals here. This first chart just shows, on average, kind of that order of withdrawals. So this person, you can see, started withdrawing from their portfolio at age 65. Um, by the way, this research does come from the Schwab Center for Financial Research. It is a couple years old, but this person started retirement at 65. You can see they're taking from their taxable accounts first. You can see at 71, their taxable accounts are depleted, so now they're dipping into their pre-tax accounts. Then RMDs pick up, and then you have your Roth IRA withdrawals at the very end. So again, that's the general order of how to withdraw from your accounts in retirement. But like I said earlier, it is individualistic. So somebody's withdrawal strategy may look a little bit more like this. And so kind of with the example of Roth conversions, with the Roth conversion, the goal is to keep your taxable income low because you'll have more room to convert for that year. So with that example, you might take from taxable accounts, you might take a little bit maybe from a Roth, depending where your income level is. But again, those Roth conversions really help lower those RMD amounts. Um, Something else that I wanted to mention is that with your pre-tax money and your tax-free money, how it moves on to the next generation is going to be different. So with your pre-tax accounts, any time a non-spouse beneficiary inherits a 401k or a traditional IRA, that non-spouse beneficiary has 10 years to deplete the entire pre-tax account, 10 years from the original owner's date of passing. Additionally, with pre-tax accounts, there are annual required minimum distributions. Now, if you passed on a Roth IRA to a non-spouse beneficiary, they still have to deplete the account within 10 years, but that beneficiary is not going to get stuck with a big tax bill. Um, so, I mean, I'm sure you could imagine, if you passed on a $2 million pre-tax account to one beneficiary, they have to withdraw that all within 10 years. That's a lot of taxes that person's going to have to pay. So the Roth conversions, again, help with the RMDs and then help planning for your beneficiaries' taxes. Next, I just want to touch on a few common mistakes that I see people make. Number one is claiming Social Security too early. Now, there are some circumstances where it does make sense to file for Social Security a little bit earlier. But some advantages are number one, you do receive those monthly payments for a much longer period of time. The earliest you can file for Social Security is 62, and the latest is age 70. If you file at 62, maybe you are the lower earning spouse. And then if you do file at 62, this just gives your higher earning spouse time for his benefit or her benefit to get larger, so they can wait to file. Another reason somebody might file for Social Security at 62 is if they are retiring early, maybe they lose their health care coverage because Medicare kicks in at age 65. So if you retire before that, you will have to bridge that cost gap. And so sometimes portfolio withdrawals just you might be digging too much into principal, and that's when people might file for Social Security a little bit earlier just to cover those health insurance premiums from policies on the exchange. Now, some disadvantages for claiming Social Security too early. You may have heard of a term called your full retirement age. For some people, that's age 66. If you were born after 1959, it's age 67. But your full retirement age is, I guess, in my opinion or my words, the age you get the best, I guess, bang for your buck based off of what you've paid into Social Security. So if you file at 62 instead of that 66 or 67 range, your benefit reduction is actually around 30%. That's how big of a difference that dollar amount can be from 62 to 66 or 67. Another disadvantage, and I don't think this is talked about very much, is that if you are under that full retirement age and you're claiming benefits and you have earned income, so W-2 income, if you make 23,400 or more, $1 is deducted for every $2 that you actually earn above this benefit. Now, in the year that you actually reach that full retirement age, $1 is deducted for every $3 earned above 62,160. And then in the month you actually reach that full retirement age, your benefits are no longer reduced. Again, this really only applies if you're working and you have earned income. So just something to keep in mind if you are wanting to retire a little early, then maybe work part-time. There are thresholds for that. Another common mistake I see is underestimating medical expenses in retirement. So I just wanted to briefly go over the insurance you actually do get when Medicare kicks in. So again, that kicks in at 65. First, you'll have Medicare Part A. That portion is completely free. So that's going to be hospital insurance. So inpatient hospital care, skilled nursing facilities, hospice care, some home health care, but that's free. And then you'll also have Medicare Part B. So this is about $185 per month. Now, there is something called an income related monthly adjustment amount. It's also called IRMA for short. So you may have heard of it. Basically, what happens with Medicare Part B is your income from about 2 years ago, so 2023, um, you look at your modified adjusted gross income, and if your income for 2023 was above 212,000, you have an additional IRMA surcharge on that Medicare Part B premium. So if you fall into that income range for that year. Instead of it being 185 per month, it is 259 a month. And typically your Medicare Part B premium is deducted from your Social Security benefits. But this covers things like doctor services, outpatient care, preventive services, so things like exams, lab tests, and then it covers some outpatient prescription drug costs. Now, Medicare does not cover long-term care, dental, eye exams, hearing aids, or prescription drugs. Um, Out of those four options, I think long-term care is probably going to be the most expensive. Long-term care, it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but it can be very pricey. It depends by state. I'm pretty sure that in Ohio, the average annual cost for long-term care um, it ranges. I've seen 55,000, I've seen 60, I've seen, 65, but that's going to be the most expensive cost if that does apply to you. So to help plan for these medical expenses not covered by Medicare, you have Medicare Advantage plans. That's also called Medicare Part C. We also have Medicaid. That is a need-based program. So ideally, you don't want to go on Medicaid. There's typically an income limit and an asset limit to even qualify. Third, you could always get a long-term care policy. I recommend doing this, while you're still working, not near retirement age, because as you get older, these long-term care policy premiums do get very expensive, and I don't think it's worth it to start that once you reach a certain age. You can also supplement medical expenses utilizing an HSA account. People typically have these while they're still working. They might have an HSA account through an employer. Once you retire, you don't lose your HSA account. You can roll that over to wherever you hold your other retirement accounts because your HSA account is invested in stocks. So you can continue to use that to supplement expenses. And then the last bullet point is pretty simple. It's possible you can always cover long-term care costs just by being diligent about saving into your accounts. Again, you just have to have quite a bit in there depending on how expensive that medical cost is. Another mistake that I do see pretty often, specifically with people who are still working, is borrowing from your 401k. So I just wanted to go through a real quick example. Um, so this comes from JP Morgan's Guide to Retirement. And these assumptions are you're looking at somebody who is 25, their starting salary is about 30,000 a year. It increases for inflation annually. This person contributes 5% to their 401k. Their employer match is also 5%. And you can see that this person has taken out two loans and then they did one withdrawal. So each of these occurrences, the loaner withdrawal was about $10,000 at a 7.5% interest rate. And you can see over here on the right that just those three loans slash withdrawals, by age 65, the portfolio would be at about 1.2 million versus had those loans or withdrawals not happened, you would be right under 1.7. So you're, borrowing or withdrawing $30,000 out of a 401k and it's making more than a $400,000 difference by the time you actually retire. So we look at these as a lender of last resort. I understand that things do happen and sometimes you have to pull from a 401k, but again, ideally not our first choice. And then another common mistake I see is just avoiding the stock market or being way, way too conservative. So just a couple reminders is that over the last 20 years, the S&P 500 has averaged about 10% annually. Over the last 20 years, the average intra-year decline was about 15%, but over the last 20 years, 75% of those years have been positive. So we have just one other example here. This person 20 years ago contributed $10,000 into the S&P 500. And if this person had stayed invested through all of the bear markets, all of the bull markets, they would have almost $72,000 today. However, if they had maybe sold out at one point, reallocated, not had been in the S&P anymore, if they had missed just 5 of the best trading days, it nearly cuts the portfolio balance by a third. And it's really hard to time the market. Um, but that's why we recommend just trying to stay invested as much as possible because a lot of times some of the best trading days actually happen during some of the worst years. So again, looking at over the last 20 years, I know 2008 specifically had some of the best trading days, and then 2022, and I'm sure we all remember how those years were with the market. So if you had missed just the best 25 days, your investment would have been worth just under 16,000. So that's a pretty big difference. 25 days is, just being sold out of the market for a month. So just really important to stay invested as long as possible. So that brings us kind of to the end of the presentation. I know Jenna is going to hop back on here in a minute and we're going to do a Q&A.
Yes. So this slide just has a QR code you can scan that takes you right to our website. I also put a screenshot here to see the visual of the website and how Taylor's blogs show up on jessupwealthmanagement.com. If you would like to automatically receive an alert when Taylor puts out another blog post, you can email your first and last name to inquiries@jessupwealthmanagement.com, and that will sign you up to automatically receive those. So now we will move on to our Q&A. So as you have probably noticed when you log you're automatically muted. So if you do have a question, try to use the raise your hand function. It should be at the very top bar of this webinar. It has a little hand. If you raise that, I will go in and allow you to unmute yourself. Then you can hit the microphone button and you will be able to ask that question audibly to us. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to raise your hand now. And we'll just kind of wait around here, see if anyone has questions. If not, we will log off and I will actually be uploading a recording of this webinar to our YouTube. So if something really stuck out at you and you want to either share this with someone or you want to go back, you want to watch it again, go to a specific part, anything like that, it will be available on YouTube. Um, but we will just wait around here a little bit longer to see if there are any questions. If not, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be doing this quarterly as Taylor continues these three-part series. All right, I don't think we're going to get any questions here, and that's perfectly fine. We will sign off and we will see you next time, hopefully at the end of, I believe it's going to be June. So thank you everyone for joining. Thanks, Taylor. That was amazing. And continue to follow our blog as it goes out each month.
Thank you, Jenna.
Of course.